Welcome to Classic Literature Nap Time. You're on the Mousebone ship, the Art Academy at Sea. We're joined by the cat crew today. Can you hear her purring? Her name is Michael, and she's a senior tuxedo cat. What's my name? Oh, I'm one of the honorary cat crew. I'm a human named Brene Marshall. I am the author of Mousebones, and I would like to read to you today from classic literature, The 11 Wild Swans by Hans Christian Andersen. You'll hear interruptions, you'll hear Michael Cat purr, you'll hear some mistakes, but all of that is okay because we are getting ready for nap time. Far away from here, in the lands the swallows fly to, when we're having winter, there lived a king who had 11 sons and one daughter, Elisa. The 11 brothers, princes they were, went to school with stars on their breasts and swords at their sides. They wrote on gold slates with diamond pencils and could read backwards as easily as forwards. Anybody could see straight off they were princes. I think it would be fun to try to read backwards. Princes were they that off straight see could anybody forwards as easily as backwards. Their sister Elisa sat at home on a little stool made of looking glass and had a picture book that had cost half the kingdom to buy. Ah, those children had a fine time of it, to be sure, but it wasn't to be like that forever. Their king, their father, who was king of the whole country, married a bad queen, and she was not at all nice to the poor children. The first day, the very first day they noticed it. There were great doings all over the palace, and the children played at visitors. But instead of their having all the cakes and baked apples that were left, she only gave them sand in a teacup and told them they could pretend it was something real. The week after, she boarded the little sister Elisa out in the country with some laborers. And it wasn't long before she got the king to believe such things about the poor princes that he cared not a rap about them any more. I wonder if the king was related to Hansel and Gretel's father. So easily persuaded, too easily persuaded. Mm-mm-mm. Fly away out into the wind and fend for yourselves, said the wicked queen. Fly as big birds without any voice. But she couldn't do all the harm she would have dearly liked to do, and they turned into 11 beautiful wild swans. With a strange cry, they flew out of the palace windows, far away, over the fields and woods. It was still quite early morning when they passed the place where their sister Elisa lay asleep in the laborer's room. There they hovered over the roof and turned their long necks hither and thither and flapped their wings, but nobody heard or saw it. They had to go on, far upward towards the clouds, far into the wide world. They flew into a great dark forest that stretched right down to the seashore. Poor little Elisa, in the laborer's cottage, played with a green leaf, the only toy she had, and she pricked a hole in the leaf and peeped through it toward the sun, and it seemed as if she was looking at the bright eyes of her brothers. And every time the warm rays shone on her cheek, she thought of all the kisses they had given her. One day passed, just like another, when the breeze blew through the great rose bushes outside the house. It whispered to the roses, "Who can be prettier than you?" But the roses shook their heads and said, "Why, Elisa." When the old woman sat in the doorway of a Sunday and read her hymn book, the breeze would turn the leaves and say to the book, "Who can be better than you?" "Why, Elisa." And the hymn book, and what the roses and hymn books said, was no more than the truth. When she was 15 years old, she was sent for to go home, and when the queen saw how pretty she was, she became full of anger and hatred for her. She would have dearly liked to turn her into a wild swan like her brothers, but she dared not do it at once, for the king wanted to see his daughter. Early in the morning, the queen went to the bathroom, which was built of marble and decked out with soft skins and lovely rugs, and she took 3 toads and kissed them, and said to the first, "Hop on to Elisa's head when she gets into the bath, that she may become as stupid as you. Sit yourself on her forehead," she said to the second, "that she might become as ugly as you, so that her father shall not know her. Lie on her heart," she whispered to the third. "Let her have an evil mind, and let her suffer anguish from it." Then she put the toads into the clear water, which forthwith took on a greenish tint, and called Elisa, and undressed her, and made her go down into the water. And she dived, and as she dived into it, the first toad clambered into her hair, and the second onto her forehead, and the third onto her heart. But Elisa seemed not to notice it. At the moment when she stood up, there were 3 red poppies floating on the water. Had the beasts not been so poisonous and not been kissed by the witch, they would have been changed into red roses. Still, flowers they did become, merely from resting on her head and her heart. She was too good and innocent for any witchcraft to have power over her. When the wicked queen saw that, she rubbed Elisa all over with walnut juice, so that she was all dark brown, and she smeared her pretty face with nasty ointment, and let her lovely hair get all in a tangle. It was it was impossible to recognize that pretty Elisa. So when her father saw So when her father saw her, he was dreadfully shocked, and that said that was never his daughter, and indeed nobody knew her but the watchdog and the swallows, and they were poor dumb creatures that couldn't do anything. How silly a king to not recognize his daughter with unbrushed hair and a cute tan. Hmm. Only a short while Only a short while had she been in the forest before the night fell. She had wandered far from any road or path, so she laid herself down on the soft moss. Oops, I skipped some session. Okay. Poor Elisa. She cried and thought of her 11 brothers all gone. Sorrowfully, she stole out of the palace and walked all day over field and moor into the great forest. She had no notion where she wanted to go, but she was in such trouble and yearned for her brothers who, she was sure, had been driven out in the wide world like herself, and she was set on trying to find them. Only a short while had she been in the forest before the night fell. She had wandered far from any road or path. So she laid herself down on the soft moss, said her evening prayer, and rested her head against a stump. All was quiet. The air was very soft, and round about in the grass and moss there shone like a green fire hundreds of glowworms. When she gently stirred a twig with her hand, the shining creatures fell down beside her like shooting stars. All night long she dreamt of her brothers. They were playing together again as children, writing with diamond pencils on gold slates, and looking at the lovely picture book that had cost half the kingdom. But on the slates, "Hello, cat crew. You seem a bit itchy even after your flea treatment. Did you want to come closer? You can sit on the warm blanket." "Yes, Senior Cat, you're always welcome." Where was I? But on the slates they didn't write as they used to, noughts and crosses. No, but the bravest of deeds they had done, and all they had lived through and seen. And in the picture book everything was alive. The birds sang, and people came out of the book and talked to Elisa and her brothers. But when she turned the page, they jumped back again at once, so as not to cause confusion in the pictures. That would be fun, wouldn't it? To have illustrations come alive. When she woke up, when she woke up, the sun was already high. She could not actually see it, for the tall trees spread their branches thick and close, but the rays played through them like a glittering cloth of gold. There was a fragrance from the fresh greenwood, and the birds were almost ready to perch on their shoulders. She heard a splashing of water. There were a number There were a number of springs, all falling into a pool that had the most beautiful sandy bottom. True, the bushes grew thick about it, but in one place the deer had made a wide opening, and there Elisa went to the water, which was so clear that if the breeze had not so stirred the branches and bushes that they moved, she would have thought they were painted on the bottom of the pool. So sharply was every leaf reflected there, alike those the sun shone through and those that were in the deepest shadow. As soon as she saw her own face, she was quite horrified, so brown and ugly it was. "Oh, Elisa, you have never had a good tan." But when she wetted her little hand and rubbed her eyes and forehead, the white skin gleamed out once more. So she laid aside all her clothes and slipped out into the cool water, a fairer king's daughter than she were not all in the world. Elisa could learn a few things. Being tanned by the sun is not a bad thing. Being naturally brown is pretty. Oh well, when she had dressed herself again and plaited her long hair, She went to the spouting spring and drank from the hollow of her hand, and so wandered further into the forest without knowing whither she went. She thought about her brothers. She thought about the good God who certainly would not forsake her. It was He who made the wild apples grow to feed the hungry. It was He who guided her to a tree of them, its boughs bending under the fruit, and there she made her midday meal and set props under the branches, and then went on to the darkest part of the forest. It was so still there that she could hear her own footsteps. Nay, every little withered leaf that bent beneath her feet. Not a bird was to be seen. Not a sunbeam could pierce between the many close-set branches. The tall trunks stood so close together that when she looked straight before her, it seemed as though there was one great fence of timber, trunk after trunk, closing her in all round. Yes, indeed, there was a solitude there, the like of which she had never known. The light, the night was very dark. Not a single glowworm shone out of the moss, and with a troubled mind she lay down to sleep. And then she thought that the branches above her parted, and our Lord looked down on her with loving eyes, and little angels peeped out above his head and beneath his arms. When he woke in the morning, she was not sure whether she had dreamt it or whether it had really happened. She walked on but a few steps, and then she met an old woman with a basket of berries. How interesting that there was an old woman reading a hymn book, and now there's an old woman with a basket of berries. Is it the same woman? Some of which she gave her. Elisa asked her if she had not seen 11 princes riding through the forest. No, said the old woman, but yesterday I saw 11 swans with gold crowns on their heads swimming down the river close by here. And she guided Elisa some way further to a high bank, at the bottom of which was a winding stream. The tree on its banks stretched their long leafy branches across it toward each other, and where their natural growth did not let them meet, they had torn their roots loose from the earth and leant over the water and twined their boughs together. Elisa said goodbye to the old woman and walked alongside the stream to the place where it flowed out. On the broad open seashore. All the beautiful sea lay spread out before the young girl, and not a sail showed itself, not a boat was to be seen. How could she get further? She gazed at the numberless pebbles on the beach. The water had worn every one of them round. Glass, iron, stone, everything that lay washed up there had taken its shape from the water, and yet the water was far softer than her own delicate hand. It keeps rolling on untiring, and that is how it shapes the hard things smooth, and I will be as untiring as it is. I thank you for your lesson, your clear rolling billows. One day my heart tells me you will bear me to my brothers. On the seaweed that had been washed up lay 11 swans' feathers. She gathered them into a bunch. There were drops of water on them. Whether dew or tears, who could tell? It was lonely down there on the shore, but she did not feel it, for the sea gave her infinite changes to look at, and more, infinite changes to look at, more within a few hours' space than a freshwater lake would show in a whole year. If a big black cloud came over, it was if the sea would say, I too can look black. Then the wind blew and the waves showed their white sides. But if the cloud shone red and the wind fell to sleep, then the sea was like a rose leaf. Sometimes it was green, sometimes white. But however, it still slept there and was always a gentle movement along the beach. The water heaved slowly as the breast of a sleeping child. Just as the sun was about to set, Elisa saw 11 wild swans with golden crowns on their heads, flying towards the land. They floated one behind another, looking like a long white ribbon. Elisa clambered up the bank and hid behind a bush. The swans alighted close to her and flapped their great white wings. The moment the sun was beneath the waves, the swans' skins fell off, and there stood 11 fair princes, Elisa's brothers. She uttered a loud cry, "Hey!" For they were greatly altered. She knew that it was they, was sure it must be they. She sprang into their arms and called them by their names. And happy were they when they saw and recognized their little sister, so tall and so beautiful. What would you name Elisa's brothers? Would you name one Michael? How about Daniel? How about Greg? They laughed and wept, and very quickly they came to know about each other and how ill their stepmother had dealt with them all. "We brothers," said the eldest, "fly about in the shape of wild swans so long as the sun is in the sky. When it is set, we take our human shape, so at sunset we always must take care to have a resting place for our feet, for if we are flying then up among the clouds, we should fall in man's form down into the deep. We do not live here. A fair land like this lies on the other side of the water. But the way to it is long. We have to cross the wide sea, and there is no island on our course where we could spend the night. There is only a little lonely rock that stands up halfway out. It's only large enough for us to stand side by side and rest on it. If the sea is high, the water leaps up high above us, yet we thank God for for it. There we spend the night in our human form, but for it could never visit but for it we could never visit our dear fatherland, for our flight takes up 2 of the longest days of the year. Only once a year it has permitted us to visit our father's home. 11 days we can stay here, fly over this great forest, and from there we can look at the castle where we were born, where our father lives, and see the bell tower of the church where our mother is buried. Here we feel the very trees and bushes are an heirloom, where the wild horses gallop over the plains as we saw them in our childhood. Rewind. Go back. I'm a bit puzzled why they have to be on that tiny piece of land where they have to stand. They can't even sit or be in a sleeping bag at night. Is this part of the curse? Do they have a flying route? That's part of their curse? It seems to be. Otherwise, I believe princes that can read forwards and backwards could make a better travel flight plan where they could rest and even visit their sister. I think it must be part of the curse. What do you think? Here the charcoal burner sings the old songs we danced to as children. Here is our father's land here we grew up, and here we have found you, you dear little sister. We still have 2 days to stay here, and then we must away over the sea to a land that is beautiful but is not our own. How can we take you with us? We have neither ship nor boat. How can I contrive to free you? Said their sister, and they went on talking together almost all night, with only an hour or two of sleep. Elisa was wakened by the sound of swans' wings rustling above her. The brothers were changed once more, and flew about in wide circles, and at last flew away, but one of them, the youngest, stayed behind. The swan laid his head on her bosom, and she fondled his white wings. They spent the whole day together. Toward evening, the others came back, and when the sun was down, they stood there in their proper forms. So it looks like they have the choice to fly or stay in one place. Hmm. What other conditions of their curse do they have? Tomorrow we fly away from here and dare not come back for nearly a whole year, but we cannot leave you like this. Have you the courage to come with us? My arm is strong enough to carry you through the forest, and we must not together have strong and we must not together have strong enough wings to fly with you over the sea? Wait a minute. And must we not together have strong enough wings to fly you over the sea? Yes, take me with you, said Elisa. They spent the whole night weaving a net out of pliant willow bark and the stout reeds, and it was large and strong. On it Elisa lay down, and when the sun came up and the brothers changed to wild swans, they gripped the neck in their beak. They gripped the net in their beaks and flew high up towards the clouds with their dear sister, who was still asleep. If you were asleep and you were taken in a net far up into the sky by 11 wild swans, would you feel it? Would you think it was part of your dream? Would you feel the wind underneath you? What do you think? The sunbeams fell hotly on her face, so one of the swans flew above her head that his broad wings might shade her. They seem very concerned about the sun, and they're very, very pale, as I described before. Maybe they are horrified about sunburn, and maybe that's why they do not know about tanning, because perhaps they cannot tan. Maybe they only burn. They were far from land when Elisa awoke. She thought she was still dreaming. So strange it seemed to her to be borne over the sea, high through the air. At her side lay a branch with beautiful ripe berries on it, and a bundle of sweet-tasting roots. Her youngest brother had gathered them and laid them by her. She smiled gratefully at him, for she knew it was he who was flying straight over her head and shading her with his wings. I think she is best friends with her youngest brother. What do you think? So they were so high up that the first ship they saw beneath them looked like a white gull lying on the water. A great cloud came behind them like a mighty mountain, and on it Elisa saw the shadows of herself and the 11 swans, flying there as huge as giants. It was like a drawing, prettier than any she had seen before. But as the sun climbed higher, but as the sun climbed higher, and the cloud was left farther behind, the moving shadow picture disappeared. All day they flew on like a rushing dart through the air, yet their pace was slower than Yet their pace was slower than at other times, so now that they had their sister to carry. All day they flew on, like a rushing dart through the air, yet their pace was slower than at other times, now that they had their sister to carry. Bad weather too came on, and evening grew near. With terror, Elisa saw the sun sinking, and yet the lonely rock in the sea was not in sight. She thought the swans were playing their wings more strongly. It was her fault they could not go swiftly enough. When the sun was down, they would turn into men and fall into the sea and be drowned. From the very bottom of her heart, she sent up a prayer to our Lord. But still, she could see no rock. The black cloud grew nearer. The heavy gusts of wind portended a storm. The clouds gathered into a single menacing billow, which sped onward, looking like a mass of lead. One flash of lightning followed hard on another. The sun was now at the very rim of the sea. Elisa's heart beat quickly then. The swans plunged downward so quickly she thought she must fall, but then they floated again. The sun was half beneath the water. Then first she sighted the little rock beneath her, looking no larger than a seal's head, sticking above the water. How swiftly the sun sank! It was no bigger than a star. Then her foot touched the firm ground, and the sun went out like the last spark on a bit of burning paper. Wasn't that suspenseful? Would they drown? Would they drop her? Can you think of a loophole? Art Academy at Sea Mousebone students? There are several loopholes, huh? What did you notice? Did you notice that the youngest brother could stay behind and the others could take a flight? Since that were so, is it that they have to return to that little island, that little rock in the middle of the sea? Must it be that one? Couldn't they land anywhere else for a rest, even before sunset? What else did you notice? They were very terrified of drowning. Hmm, but how many years have they been swans? And how many years have they been humans? Wouldn't an option be for them to fly around and find a swimming teacher? Or watch a manatee or a seal and observe how they swim? And maybe take turns when they are human to swim in the sea? Or maybe that's too dangerous. Is it a condition that they have to be in the middle of a stormy sea on that rock? Or could they be human on a calm sandbank, on a calm sandbank where the water is much calmer and much more shallow with a sandy bottom? Maybe they could practice being swimmers. I know this is a folk tale and a fairy tale, but it's fun and good exercise for your mind to see what are the curse conditions and how to get around it. It's like looking for a plot hole, right? Let's continue. Then her foot touched firm. Let's see. Let's go. Then first she sighted the little rock beneath her, looking no larger than a seal's head looking no larger than a seal's head sticking up above the water. How swiftly the sun sank! It was no bigger than a star. Then her foot touched the firm ground, and the sun went out like the on a burning bit of last spark on a bit of burning paper. I so liked saying that I repeated myself. She saw her brother standing about her, arm in arm, for there was no room for any more than them and herself. The sea beat against the rock and burst over them like a shower of rain. The heavens shone with a blood The heavens shone with a blaze that kept flaring out, and the thunder rolled, peal upon peal. But the sister and the brothers held each other's hands and sang a hymn, and it brought them comfort and courage. If you had to deal with the salty sea spray and the cold ocean water, there is something unusual about them that they don't get sick. They don't catch a cold or pneumonia. So that is another magical element. At dawn, the air was clear and still, and so soon as the sun was up, the swans flew off with Elisa from the islet. The sea was still rough, and when they were high up in the air, it looked as if the white foam on the dark green sea were millions of swans floating on the water. When the sun rose higher, Elisa saw ahead of her, half swimming in the air, a range of mountains with shining masses of ice on their slopes, and in the midst of it there lay, stretched out, a palace a good mile long, with one mighty colonnade rising over another. Low down before it waved groves of palms and wonderful blossoms, large as mill wheels. She asked if it were the land she was bound for, but the swans shook their heads. For that which she was looking for that which she was looking at was the lovely, ever-changing cloud palace of the fairy Morgana, and into it they dared to bring no mortal. Oh, notice a reference to King Arthur and Morgana. I guess it's saying it's in the same universe. Elisa gazed upon it. Suddenly, mountains, groves, and palace all fell to pieces, and in their place rose a score of noble churches, each like the next, all with lofty towers and pointed windows. She fancied she could hear the organ sounding, but it was the sea she heard. And now she was quite near the churches, but they changed to a fleet of ships sailing onward beneath her. She looked down, and it was but the sea wrack that was spreading over the water. Yes, it was an endless series of changes that she had to look at, but now she saw the real land she was bound for. There rose the beautiful blue mountains, with forests of cedar and towns and castles. Long ere the sun had set, she was sealed on the slope before a large cave, whose mouth was grown over with delicate green creeping plants that seemed like broidered carpets. Isn't that a pretty image? Embroidered carpets. I'm thinking almost like embroidered rugs. You've seen embroidery floss in peacock blue before on a rug? Now we shall see what you dream of here tonight, said the youngest brother as she led. Now we shall see what you dream of here tonight, said the youngest brother as he led her to her sleeping chamber. "If I could but dream how to free you," said she, and the thought filled her mind most vividly, and earnestly did she pray to God for his help. Nay, even in her sleep she went on praying, and then it seemed to her that she flew up high into the air to the cloud palace of the fairy Morgana, and the fairy came to meet her, all beautiful and shining, but all the same very like the old woman who had given her berries in the forest and told her of the swans with the golden crowns. "Your brothers can be freed," said she, "but have you the courage and endurance? True, it is that the sea is softer than your delicate hands, and yet can change the shape of the hard stones. But it does not feel the pain that your fingers will feel. It has no heart, and does not suffer the fear and trouble that you must go through. Do you see its stinging nettle that I hold in my hand? Many of this kind grow about the cave where you are sleeping, but only they and those that grow out of churchyard graves are fit for your purpose. Mark you that. These you must pick till they will burn your skin into blisters. You must break them up with your feet, and you will get flax from them. And with it you must weave until it is wholly ended. You must weave and hem 11 shirts with long sleeves. Cast these over the 11 wild swans, and the spell will be broken. But remember this well, that from the moment you begin this work, and until it's wholly ended, even though a year should pass in meantime, you must not speak. The first word you utter will pierce the heart of your brothers like a deadly dagger. On your tongue hangs their life. How interesting that in fairy tales, oftentimes the main character, the heroine, the main character has to go silent, has to manage with complete silence, unable to speak. Notice that the original Little Mermaid, written by Hans Christian Andersen, also she trades her tongue for a pair of legs to the sea witch. She has no voice. It is a very costly sacrifice. Here she does not have to have her tongue cut out, but she cannot speak, or it will be like a dagger. How will she even explain this to her brothers? We'll see, huh? Take good heed of these things. And at the same moment she touched her hand with the nettle. It was like scorching flame. Elisa awoke with the touch. It was bright day, and close by, where she slept, lay a nettle like that which she had seen in her dream. She fell on her knees and gave thanks to God, and went out of the cave to begin her work. With her delicate hands, she grasped the horrible nettles, which were like fire to touch, and burnt great blisters on her hands and arms, but she suffered that gladly, if she might but free her dear brothers. She crushed every nettle with her bare feet, and wound up the green flax from it. And I'll stop there. What do you think, Mousebones Academy? What are some of your thoughts, Mousebone Academy students? What do you think will happen between now and the time that she creates 11 of these garments out of this nettle? How long do you think it will take her? What type of obstacles might come in her way? Yes, very true. Since the lifting of the curse requires nettles, and the nettles just can't be any nettles. They have to come from churchyard graves. How will she gather them? How will she keep the sweaters? You see, as she travels from place to place. These are interesting questions when you examine classic literature. There is a magical element, but of course, there's also a practical element. Do you see plot holes? That's part of the fun of reading. This has been Renee Marshall reading classic literature for nap time for Mousebone Art Academy students.